Joining us now is Terry O'Neill. Terry is a feminist attorney. She is a professor. She is an activist for social justice, and she is president of the National Organization for Women. Terry, thanks so much for joining us.
RJ, it's really great to talk with you.
Always great to talk to you too. Although, of course, the circumstances under which we are talking now are not so great. You know, I had the strong feeling, Terry, and I've mentioned it a couple times on this program, that when the shooting happened in San Bernardino, we had a lot of people in this country who were more than happy to change the subject from the shooting in Colorado, the shooting at Planned Parenthood, and I feel it's very important that we not overlook as a society the lessons of that Planned Parenthood shooting, because and of course we don't want to diminish the lessons of any such tragedy, but I think it's very important in the case of the Planned Parenthood shooting. It was one of the occasions where I think I felt it most strongly in my gut, the most viscerally, that there is, in fact, a war on women taking place, and that it's not just a figure of speech. But I was curious to know your thoughts on that.
No, that is exactly right, RJ. Actually, domestic terrorism is really different from international terrorism, or specifically Al Qaeda and ISIS terrorism. Those organizations are running a specific political agenda, using violence as a primary means of achieving their goals. Domestic terrorism in the United States has a very, very long and unfortunate history. It includes terrorism generated by the Ku Klux Klan right after the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
These days, you jump to the 21st century, and we have significant domestic terrorism against women's healthcare providers. Thousands, literally thousands of incidents of violent attacks, be it bombings or fire, arson, or vandalism, or to the point of physical assault and even murder at abortion clinics, have happened since the 1970s right up to the present. That is a form of domestic terrorism in which a radical fringe, a violent fringe of the anti-abortion movement has decided to use violence to try to get its way. The most dangerous development in this history of domestic terrorism against women's health is that a national political party has decided to align itself with the violent fringe, and in my view is now engaging in incitements to violence.
Well, and I think it's very important that we have that conversation. I think people are sometimes, particularly in the media, are sometimes reluctant to draw the connection between political speech and acts of terrorism or acts of terrorist violence. But I think it's a connection with a long history. I mean, there's a reason why, for example, we have the term rabble rouser in our politics, the notion of people whose speech is incendiary and incites to violence. And I think in the case of the Planned Parenthood case, the shooting in Colorado, it is not a leap of any kind to draw a connection between systematic lies generated by one party, in this case, and its allies, about, for example, the sale of baby parts, and a killer who cites as one of his motives for killing the sale of baby parts, which again does not take place. But the connection seems clear to me. Am I missing something?
No, you're absolutely right. And what's really important about this is the knowing use of false accusations. These Republicans in the United States Congress have been shown very clearly by an exhaustive study of those faked up videos that the so-called uncut videos, in fact, have been manipulated, cut, pasted, and are fraudulent. So we have a detailed analysis of those fraudulent videos and of how they are fraudulent, and they simply are not factual, would never be allowed to be introduced into a court of law because they have been shown to have been corrupted. The Republican Congress people, the women and men on the Republican side in the United States House of Representatives, have seen the report that the videos are fake and nonetheless have utilized the videos along with incendiary language like murdering and baby body parts and other kinds of truly incitement to violence type language using materials they know to be false. That is unprecedented.
Well, and it strikes me. I think your use of the word unprecedented is an important one. We're talking with Terry O'Neill, president of the National Organization for Women, and I think it's extremely disturbing because, look, we could have the usual conversation about how people of conscience may disagree, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is the truth. Lie is a lie. And I think when you get into a situation where prominent figures in a political party are knowingly spreading misinformation. I mean, that's a dangerous corruption of the democratic process. And when the party itself doesn't rebuke them, because there have been histories in the past of both political parties in this nation rebuking members, politicians within that party as representatives of the party for distorting the truth. The fact is that I'm not aware of the Republican Party as an institution coming out and saying, look, guys, people of conscience disagree on this issue, but you can't knowingly lie. Are you? I mean, doesn't that also seem like does that seem to you also like a line that's been crossed?
It has been crossed. It is, in fact, just the opposite of what you suggested. What they should have done was exactly what you said, is they should say, hey, guys, you can't be fomenting all of this hate and rage on the basis of a lie, of total deception. Instead of saying that, they are calling on the national media to engage in false equivalency. You have Carly Fiorina saying, oh, but the left is engaging in incendiary rhetoric the same as we are. And when you ask, what is the incendiary rhetoric on the left? And it is, well, you're calling me out for telling a lie.
Right.
In her world, pointing out that she's lying constitutes the equivalent incendiary rhetoric that she is engaging in. It's completely outrageous, and what she's really banking on. Mike Huckabee did the same thing, called out criticizing the left for engaging in strong rhetoric. Ted Cruz was in there saying that the shooter in Colorado Springs was a leftist activist.
Right.
Himself.
Oh, and transgendered.
A transgender leftist act.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
And by the way, Terry, I want to quote to you verbatim the words of Carly Fiorina, presidential candidate of the Republican Party. She said that falsified video by the so-called Center for Medical Progress, and I quote, that it showed, quote, a fully formed fetus on the table, its heart beating, its legs kicking, while someone says we have to keep it alive to harvest its brain, end quote. These are the words of a Republican presidential candidate who, to my knowledge, has not been chastised for that by any leader of the Republican Party.
In the party, exactly. And she was challenged by reporters who said, do you admit that this is, they went and looked and couldn't find any such thing in these videos, which themselves are falsified to make Planned Parenthood look as bad as they possibly could. Even those falsified videos didn't have that kind of a scene in it that Carly Fiorina described. And reporters called her out on it, but no one in her party has called her out on it. That's exactly right. That and I think what we need to do is have everyone in the media really take a hard look at how these Republican candidates and elected officials are utilizing the media's desire to be even-handed. They're using that very good desire to be even-handed and perverting it into a false to really try to get the media to engage in false equivalency,
which it's been doing for many, many years. And I have to say that I just parenthetically, I don't feel it's as well intentioned as perhaps as you do. I think it's more a matter of cowardice on the part of the media not to challenge. But who knows? The point is, and we're talking with Terry O'Neill, president of the National Organization for Women. The point is that the media has started challenging, at least begun to challenge politicians for these falsehoods. But I'll tell you one media outlet that has not, and that's Fox News, which in fact is promoting this stuff. Now, at what point? Now, I've been chastised myself. I've had very progressive publishing outlets censor or attempt to censor my work or just suppress it or just not publish it when I make the connection between some of these statements and acts of violence that quote some of the statements. So at what point is it fair and legitimate? I think of you as a very responsible activist and observer of the world. At what point is it fair to say, look, what you are doing is fomenting violence, in this case, violence directed against those who help women and women's health issues? At what point is it fair to say, look, it's not out of bounds to call you on this?
Well, honestly, Fox News, which is and Roger Ailes, a Republican operative who runs Fox News. And Fox News is the largest broadcasting arm of the Republican Party in my view, and so I don't actually include them when I think about media outlets. They are a communications outlet for a very specific political party and a very specific ideological agenda. The moment when media outlets should have said, "Hey, you're engaging in language that foments violence," would have been when Bill O'Reilly repeatedly referred to abortion provider George Tiller as "quote unquote" Tiller the killer, celebrating the murder of this man. Uh, Dr. Tiller was at his church. He was an usher at his church, and he was murdered on a Sunday morning at his church in Kansas by an individual who had been in touch with Operation Rescue, Troy Newman, and another leader of Operation Rescue. Operation Rescue is absolutely in the thick of the violent fringe of the anti-abortion movement, and Scott Roeder, who murdered Dr. Tiller, had been in touch with them in the days leading up to the murder. After the murder, Bill O'Reilly was on Fox cable television celebrating the killing of Dr. Tiller. That is a line that crossed decency by a country mile, and in fact, the Republican operative Roger Ailes never held Bill O'Reilly to account for it, as far as I know.
And what astonishes me about this on a human level, Terry O'Neill, is look, I write for Huffington Post and a number of outlets myself, and you have cases where, for example, the killer of the Knoxville Unitarians had Bill O'Reilly's book on his shelf, had Sean Hannity's book on his shelf, had Goldberg's book on 100 People Who Are Destroying America, had said he was planning to work his way through the list of people on there. If somebody ever went out and hurt somebody, God forbid, and had been reading my stuff, I'd be devastated. I'd be racked with guilt. I'd, withdraw from public life and do deep soul searching and contrition. And how can these guys, and I'm talking about the Bill O'Reillys, the Sean Hannitys, the Carly Fiorinas, the Donald Trumps, they seem to be absolutely without conscience, and it frightens me.
Yeah, it's very, very frightening. I mean, it's one thing when you have a fringe that's engaging in actual violence and especially violent rhetoric. Operation Rescue was one of the defendants in a lawsuit that the National Organization for Women brought back in the 90s. We prosecuted the Pro-Life Action League, which you've probably never heard of, another fringe violent organization, and Operation Rescue for violations of RICO. We believed that their blockading of abortion clinics and attacks on abortion clinics, and especially the violent rhetoric that they were using to issue threats to abortion clinics to get those clinics to stop providing health care the way these fringe guys didn't want them to provide health care, and provide health care in a very limited and non-medically good way for women that they wanted to. So we considered that to be extortion. We thought that was racketeering, that they were engaging in RICO violations. We filed a lawsuit. We won the lawsuit at the trial level and the appeal level. We won twice on procedural matters at the Supreme Court level. Ultimately, we did not win. But in the meantime, these fringe groups, we developed an enormous amount of information about how they operate. At the time, you didn't have presidential candidates glowingly proud of their endorsements from these fringe violent organizations. But today, Ted Cruz has been endorsed for president by none other than Troy Newman, who is the new head of Operation Rescue, which remains in the violent fringe of the anti-abortion movement. That is really the change that has taken place, and it should make us all extremely worried. This is a national political party in the United States of America. These people are vying for to carry the Republican nomination for president of the United States, and they don't appear to have any problem fomenting violence against women's health providers and the women who seek abortion care and birth control and STD screenings and all of the other reproductive health care that is provided at the women's health clinics.
And possibly just general routine medical care as well, which is also provided there. But so in the minute or so we have left, Terry O'Neill, what can we do?
Well, we have to get politically engaged. We absolutely must get politically engaged. There's a presidential election coming in 2016. All of your listeners, RJ, need to get engaged and support women's rights supporters, not only for president, but also especially for the Senate. The projection is that possibly 2 Supreme Court justices will be nominated by whoever becomes president in 2016. That is hugely important, and the Senate confirms those nominations. We need to have a Senate where a majority of the senators are pro-woman. The House of Representatives is going to be very, very difficult for us to deal with. So we need to be especially active in 2018. It can't just be getting our people to the polls in 2016. Frankly, it's a presidential election. That's easier for us on the left. The left has to mobilize for 2018. That's the House elections and 2020. Those are the elections that will then determine a lot about congressional redistricting after 2020 because of the census. Our side has to get smart about electoral organizing.
All right. Well, we're unfortunately going to have to leave it there. But Terry O'Neill, president of the National Organization for Women, which, if I recall correctly, the website is now.org.
Yes, it is.
Good. I have a good memory then. Okay. And as always, Terry, great to talk to you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, RJ. It's great to talk with you.